Parshas Yisro, Tov Shin Pei Gimel, and any of you who have been with us throughout the Nesivos Shalom Shiurim over the years knows that one of the great themes that runs through the Sefer of the Nesivos Shalom, through the Shiurim of the Nesivos Shalom, one of the themes that's very, very prevalent is that every year when we read something in the Parsha, every year at that time, the Hashpois and the Siyata D'Shmaya for that comes around again. And this week, it's very, obviously this week's Parsha, most of the Parsha speaks about the inyan of Kabbalas HaTorah, the focal point of the life of every single Jew. The Torah was given in this week's Parsha, and if the Torah was given and then we read about it, then the Nesivos Shalom tells us that every year when we read this Parsha, we have a special opportunity once again to be Mekabel the Torah. And if you think you were Mekabel the Torah already, and you were Mekabel it before, so this year you get a chance to be Mekabel it just a little bit more, and something extra, on a higher level, on a better level, something more. A Kabbalah, Kabbalas HaTorah doesn't have to mean from nothing to something. It could mean that you were Mekabel the Torah, but from now on, you're going to be a different person. You're going to keep more of the Torah. You're going to be more serious about it. You're going to learn more Torah. And this is everything that has to do with every year, the cycle coming around. This time of the year, Parshas Yisro, we are able to be Mekabel the Torah again. And we usually attempt, during the Shiur on Parshas Yisro, we usually attempt to discuss the different angles and lessons and approaches to Kabbalas HaTorah. And the Psukim in our Parsha tell us, B'chodesh HaShlishi, when did Kabbalas HaTorah happen? Right? Chodesh Sivan. B'chodesh HaShlishi, L'tzeis B'nei Yisrael Me'eretz Mitzrayim. The third month after they went out of Mitzrayim, they went out in Chodesh Nisan, right? So after 3 months, by Yom Hazeh, the pasuk tells us, Bo'u Midbar Sinai. They came to Midbar Sinai on this day. Now listen to the next pasuk. The next pasuk tells us by Yis'u Refidim that they traveled from Refidim, Vayavoyu Midbar Sinai, and they came to Midbar Sinai. So the Mefarshim speak about the Seder of these two Psukim, the Seder of the Psukim here. The first pasuk tells us already that on that day, we said by Yom Hazeh, on that day, Bo'u Midbar Sinai, they came to Midbar Sinai. And then in the very next pasuk, the Torah goes back to tell us that they traveled from Refidim, Vayisu Refidim, Vayavoyu Midbar Sinai, and once again tells us that they came to Midbar Sinai. Why twice? And of course, why in two consecutive psukim that are so close to each other? Why would it tell us twice, Bo Midbar Sinai, that they came to Midbar Sinai? So the Nesivos Shalom explains this with a beautiful approach, and he actually brings it down from the Noam Elimelech and from the Avodas Yisrael, the Koznitzer, and also from the Ari HaKadosh. So if he brings it down from these three giants, you know it must be a very, very deep and important Yesod. And the Nesivos Shalom says like this, and he begins with the Maimar, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos tells us, famous Mishnah, Akavya ben Mahalalel tells us that histakel b'shloisha dvorim, you should look at, think about three things. Ve'ena toboli de avera. If you think about these three things, you will not come to do an avera. What are these three things? Know where you come from, and to where ultimately every person goes, and also before whom Kaviyachal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, one day at the end of everybody's life, you're going to have to give a din v'cheshben on the day of reckoning to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And you think of those three things, Ein HaToba Lidei Avera. And then the Mishnah explains. The Mishnah asks the Mishnah explains actually where we come from, where we're going, and the Din B'Cheshbon, the Mishnah talks about that. So the question that is asked is, why did the Mishnah not just say histakel on these three things, that tell me where we came from, tell me where we're going, right? Speak about it right away. Why does it do it in two different stages? Histakel b'shleisha devarim. Think about these, look at these three things, and then it says, what are these three things? Where did you come from? Where are you going to go? It speaks about it, and it seemingly does it in two different stages. So the answer that's given to that is that the Tana really wants to keep it separate. He wants to give two different ways of looking at these three things. There's a higher way, and there's a way that's not as high, that is just really a little bit lower. And both are correct ideas and correct ways of doing it, but there's a better way, and there's a way that's not as good. It's actually two separate things, so the Mishnah does not put it together. And he explains like this. First we speak about each person making a cheshbon nefesh. Each person looking at where they're holding and what they're doing. The Mishnah tells you, know who you are. That every person has to know who you are. And we're saying something really, really great now. Histako b'shloisha devarim ein hatobah lidei avera. That's the first thing. Know who you are, that your neshama comes from the Kisei HaKavod. You're a Yid, you're different than any other human being in the world. Your neshama is holier, it comes from the Kisei HaKavod. And know also that you are children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No other nation, no one else, only you, Klal Yisrael. You're children, you come from the Kisei HaKavod, your neshama does, and you are also banim to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So once we tell you how great you are, the question is, how can you ever do anything against Hashem? That's number one. And where are you going? The first one is Me'ayim Basa, right? The first thing Mishnah says, think of these three things, Me'ayim Basa. So now we have an answer to that. The high road is, we come from the Kisei HaKavod. We're children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How can we ever mess that up? And then the next thing is, to be, the next part is, that we say, once you know where you're coming from, where are you going? Every person, after their lives, they go back to be near HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Vayigba liboy b'darchei Hashem. To always keep in your mind that you're different, you are great, and you're different than any other person in the world because you are a member of Klal Yisrael. To understand the godless HaYehudi, that's the first thing. Me'ayim Basa, where are we coming from? Where are we going? We are connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then after that, the Mishnah starts again, and the Mishnah tells us a separate thing. That if you're not able to think of life that way, it tells you, now the Mishnah says, you know where you come from? You know where you're going. The Mishnah delineates and explains where you come from and where you're going, which is something somewhat a little bit depressing. Right? Every person, we don't like to think about it, but every person who's born after 120 years goes to the same place. So we see from here that in Avodas Hashem, a person needs to have both approaches. You have two things, and we see it from that Mishnah of Ekavi ben Mahalalel. You need to have, on one hand, we need to always think to ourselves that we are really something. We're from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that alone should drive us to never want to do an Aveira. That alone should drive us to be holy. That alone should drive us to do the right thing. And because we are so, we never want to spoil that. That's one way of Avodas Hashem. And then there's a totally separate way that we need to think of. We need to think how we, as people, are really nothing. Me'ayin Basa, where we come from, where we're going, that's a separate thing. Two different ways of Avodas Hashem, and we try to take the higher road, but if that doesn't work, then sometimes we have to use the other way of knowing exactly where we're going. And with this concept, says in Nesivos Shalom, we can now understand in our parsha why it tells us twice that they came in two separate psukim right away. It says, Bo Midbar Sinai. They came to Midbar Sinai. The Beis Avram tells us that we know when Klal Yisrael was in Mitzrayim, they were down in the Memtesh Shari Tumah. And that's how they came to Midbar Sinai for Kabbalah Torah. They were in the Memtesh Shari Tumah. They got out of Mitzrayim. A few weeks later, they were standing at Har Sinai. That is how they came. They came that way to Har Sinai. They came there, though, with the understanding of how low they really were. They were mekabel on themselves at that time to be better in the future. And you know what? HaKadosh Baruch Hu accepted that. Imagine they were in the Memtesh Shari Tumah. They came to Har Sinai knowing that that's who they were. And they were in such a low matzav, unfortunately. But they were mekabel on themselves that asay toiv, the first thing we have to know is we're going to do better. What we did until now, I don't know. That's behind me right now. Asay toiv, we're going to do better. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was mekabel that and gave them the Torah. They skipped over everything else. And that is the first Bo Midbar Sinai. They came knowing who they were, that they were on a low matzav. They understood they were. But asay toiv, from now, I'm going to start being better. I'm going to start doing something different. And then in the very next pasuk, the Torah tells us again, Vayis'u me'Refidim, that they traveled from Refidim, they traveled away from the Yetzer Hara, they traveled away from Amalek. So now it is time for the Sur Meirah. First thing is first. You're in the Memtesh Shari Tumah, Asay Toiv. They come to Har Sinai. We are going to be better going forward. That's one way of Avodas Hashem. And now, Vayis'u me'Refidim, they understood that they had to go away from the Yetzer Hara. They had to go away from Refidim. They had to go away from Amalek. And now it was time for the Sur Meirah. But they were already at Har Sinai. And we see from here that whichever way a person does an Avodas Hashem, sometimes you could skip over many, many levels. A person wants to come to a Kabbalah Torah, understand that sometimes when people get down on themselves, who am I to be Makabel the Torah? Who am I? Where am I holding as a Jew? Where am I holding as a person? This Parsha teaches us that they came to Midbar Sinai. They came there and they understood and they heard, we are children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We are the chosen nation. We are the people of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You know what? I regret, I know I wasn't so good before, but now I want to change. Now I want to be a different person. And once they did that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was ready to give them the Torah. Afterwards, okay, Sur Meirah, now I have to do tshuva. Now I have to make sure I don't go back to the old ways. Let's just learn all these lessons, keep it together for our personal Kabbalah Torah, the Shabbos. We should all be Zoicha now, once again, this year, to be Mekabel the Torah as a new person going forward, to do the Asay Toiv, tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we're going to change this year, we're going to be different, and we're really going to be Mekabel the Torah.